This is the European History Lecture for Monday, the 29th of November, 2021. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving vacation and are ready for work because we are in it with an earnest. We have been talking about the differences between China and the West because in China, a lot of the European monarchs who would become absolutists found their muse. So, in China, the emperor was known as the Son of Heaven. In the West, Louis XIV calls himself Le Roi Soleil, the Sun King. In China, the way you tell of an emperor's success is whether or not he possesses the mandate of heaven. The mandate of heaven has nothing to do with dating adult males. I'm sorry. Oh, God, I'm sorry. Couldn't resist. Low-hanging fruit. Had to say it. Teacher joke. It's like a dad joke, only worse. The mandate of heaven is where the emperor, with his emperor powers, orients the Chinese Empire, which is the Middle Kingdom, Chung Kuo, in harmony with the constantly changing universal elemental forces and powers. And if he does that, there are no natural disasters or wars or plagues or anything bad like poverty. However, if he doesn't do that, there are all of those bad things. So literally, the emperor is blamed for the weather. Which works. Because if everything goes smoothly, everything's in harmony. If things don't go smoothly, clearly they are not, and you need a new emperor. If you need to move, David, feel free. I don't want you to be uncomfortable because of the fan.
Oh, no, I'm just thinking.
Okay. Let's see. Now, in the West, legitimacy is the moral right to rule. Absolutism is the concept that Westerners get from the East, which is that the king has all the power without limit, unlimited power, and that all of this comes from God, as expressed through the divine right of kings. In other words, if God didn't want me to be king, he wouldn't have made my mama queen and my papa king. But in fact, since he did, since I am not the child of turnip farmers and carpenters, I am your king, and you owe me allegiance. God said so by making me your king. See? Somewhat self-fulfilling. This circular logic. The sun is bright because it's so very, very full of light. If it wasn't full of light, it wouldn't be bright, would it? See? But it's compelling in a world where God is the author of all things. And maybe God wants a lousy king because the people have been unfaithful. Or God is teaching a lesson. Like he is wont to do in the Old Testament with places like Sodom and Gomorrah. Or the flood. Now, we did all that last week. Well, no, the week before last. Last week was happy vacation. Now, who runs the actual kingdom? Because no human being is capable of mastering all the details necessary to be the one and only decision maker in all the land. Good decision maker. Decision maker of wise choices. Yes. In any event, every so often, I'm sure you do. I'm sure they are wonderfully wise choices. Happy and happy choices. So, the actual kingdom in China, the empire, is run by Confucian philosophers. In English, they're called Mandarins. In Chinese, they're called Shih. S-H-I-H. Shih. What that means is scholars. Now, in Plato's Republic, he writes of a society where everyone is in their perfect job based on their talents and inclinations. The king is actually a philosopher king. The people who run things are people who are good at running things. The people who work are people who are good at working. You find your calling and you follow it. Well, in China, back about, over 2,000 years ago, before the time of Christ, around the time when the Roman Republic was beginning to crack and fall, the Chinese unified under the first sovereign emperor of the Qing Dynasty, Qing Shi Huangdi. And Qin Shi Huangdi was a bloody-handed bastard. What I mean by that is he was a mass-murdering legalist. He was the inspiration for the greatest mass murderer in all of human history, Mao Zedong, communist dictator of China from the late 40s to his death in the mid-70s. Qin Shi Huangdi made of his tomb a mountain in a flat plain. He built, or had built, an artificial mountain. It is his tomb that has those fantastic terracotta warriors, each of which is a unique individual soldier, thousands of them. Qin Shi Huangdi believed that, well, as a legalist, he believed that you make a better person by making better laws. Laws are like cuts on a bush or a tree. And what you do is you trim until you get a bonsai tree, until you get a topiary, one of those bushes that are shaped like cats or turtles or whatever. That what you can do is you can make laws. No drugs, no prostitution, no cheating on your taxes. And if you punish people sufficiently, nobody will do drugs or engage a prostitute or cheat on their taxes, because the terror of the punishment will be so great that it outweighs any of the benefits of doing those nasty things. Does legalism work? Does it work? Can you make utopia by making laws? Yeah.
The rate that you find out whether or not that stuff happens has to be really high. Because if people know they're not caught.
Yeah. So you need to spy on your people. That's a concomitant thing in a totalitarian police state. You not only have everything legislated, but everyone is watched. Not that that would ever happen here. It hasn't happened yet, and hopefully it never will. Every communist society, every fascist dictatorship, every totalitarian police state is legalistic. They all try to make a better person by making better laws. They all try to make a better society by making better laws. We'll outlaw war. We'll outlaw poverty. These both things have been done. You know what it does? It causes a lot of living people who are flawed and imperfect and individualistic to get killed prematurely by their government in peacetime. So if you think that you can murder your way to paradise, embrace legalism. Lots of people do. Yes?
That's the logic behind gun control.
Explain.
So they think that by outlawing guns are going to magically disappear. But then you see people called criminals.
Hey, my old neighborhood in the Bronx has some of the strongest gun control laws ever in the United States. And the only people that didn't have guns were law-abiding citizens. Everyone else had guns, and they used them on, black-on-black violence, brown-on-brown violence, brown-on-black, black-on-brown violence, and violence against everyone else who had money that they wanted. Now, yes, Hispanics killing blacks, blacks killing Hispanics. Oh, here's the other thing about gun control. Imagine this is a spear. Ah! Imagine this is a club. Bing! Imagine this is a rock. Boom! Imagine this is my hands. I don't need a gun to kill you. You don't need a gun to kill me. Ain't life grand? We've had all these infinite possibilities for deadly violence. There's poison and bludgeoning and piercing and suffocation and all sorts of other things. Yes, I can turn Christmas carols into evil things. It's a talent.
That one song that you used to
Yes.
I know. There's
These are a few of my favorite things. That's the name of the song. That's the refrain. So, yeah, you're right. So, if you look at the Chinese Dynasty chart on the second page of your notes, you can see this. So, Qin Shi Huangdi murders his way to a unified Chinese state, which remains unified up to the present day. And he is greatly honored for this, but he did so through profoundly completist violence. When he died, his successors tried ruling the same way, but they didn't have the vicious, paranoid streak that makes truly good totalitarian dictators. You know, you can survive Stalin, but that's not going to make you like Stalin. So the Qing dynasty is replaced by the Han dynasty about 200 years BC. And the Han dynasty is a very different sort of beast. First of all, they reject legalism as oppressive and stupid and inefficient. Instead, they embrace the philosophies of Kung Fu, Master Kung, or Confucius, which is, as you remember, a philosophy of social harmony. Now, they don't just say, we embrace Confucianism. They prove it. Because the people that are going to run the country are not the hereditary aristocrats. Now, they're going to still exist. They'll get to have some power. But the real power is going to be in the imperial government. Now, who do you hire to work in the imperial government? The Han Dynasty comes up with a system that works all the way up to the Communist Revolution in 1949. And it still works elsewhere in the world. It is the basis for our civil service laws. What the government does is make sure that throughout the country, every so often, every couple of years or so, there's an examination held in every major community. Anyone who's a guy can go to this examination. Any young man can take the examination. The examination is not about crop yields or economic theory or biology or government, the Chinese government and politics, polity. You know what it's about? Confucian philosophy. The whole exam is a test of your comprehensive knowledge of Confucian philosophy. And you could be the son of the lowest of the low peasants. If you score well on that exam, you get hired by the government, which is the best job in China. You get to become a Mandarin. Now, you're the lowest Mandarin. You get the coffee with the tea for everyone's tea. It's China. In the porcelain cups, because it's China. But that's where we get the word China from. Porcelain, China, comes from China. History is so wonderful. And you are going to be set for life because you're going to be one of the rulers. So, first of all, the exam system of the Mandarins is meritocratic. It's a meritocracy, which is the best system ever, because anyone who's smart gets hired. Every promotion within the civil service bureaucracy of China, within the Mandarins, within the Shih, is a more complex exam that you take on Confucian philosophy. So to become a senior government official, you have to really know your Confucian philosophy. To become the chief bureaucrat in all of China, and there is one, who works for the emperor but actually has much more power than the emperor, because the emperor's will is expressed in policy by these Mandarins, they have to be a master philosopher. Now, this is Plato's idea, and it's the only country, the only civilization in the world that actually makes philosophers rulers. Rome had an accidental philosopher king in the Emperor Marcus Aurelius in the 160s to 180 period. But that is not the same as having an entire government based on philosophical knowledge and reckoning. So the smartest people, regardless of family, get hired by the government. The smartest people, according to the exams, get promoted in the government. The way you get more power and more responsibility is by being a smarty pants when it comes to Confucian philosophy. This system is solid. It works. It doesn't rely on the accidents of birth. It doesn't rely on the vicissitudes of outrageous fortune. If you got the smarts, and if you apply yourself and study the guiding philosophy of the society, you get to rule. It's great. It is one of the best systems ever, really, in my humble opinion. And it works again for over 2,000 years, from about 2000, from about 200 BC all the way up to 1949. Why Confucian philosophy? Why not agronomy or biology or political science or any of the modern social sciences or sciences? Can anyone guess why Confucian philosophy and not that? David, did I see your hand?
Oh, no.
Okay. Looking for one of you. If I need to roll the dice, I will. But I'd rather not. Yes.
So, as opposed to studying like political science
Yeah,
or biology,
Yeah. Why study philosophy? Why have your
studying philosophy, because then you're more in tune with the government, with their beliefs. You're thinking more like how the rulers think. You're thinking more kind of like what the ideals of the Chinese civilization wanted to do.
Yeah, actually, you're quite right. Remember that a culture is a group of people bound together by certain core beliefs. The core belief that motivates China, from the bloody-handed tyrant Qin Shi Huangdi to the bloody-handed tyrant Mao Zedong, is not legalism, it's Confucianism. So by mastering the philosophy of social harmony, you master the philosophy that is behind everything, the entire government, the entire society. Moreover, so that would be like in the Middle Ages, people having to understand Christian theology and the philosophy of Plato, which actually were the people who ended up running most of the church affairs. And they influenced the kings, so having that. But there's something else. There's a more practical thing. What would a Confucian philosopher get that a person who masters statistics wouldn't necessarily get? Besides a harmony with the philosophy that governs the broader society. What does studying philosophy, what can, I won't say will, because I've met a couple of philosophy majors who are completely useless to themselves and everyone else in life. But in general terms, what can you get from learning Confucian philosophy that you might not get anywhere else? Not you. Sure, you said something. I'm thinking Mira or Maddie because you came in a little late. Mira, what could studying philosophy give a leader that would be useful to their good leadership? Take a guess. If you're wrong, no big deal.
Okay, well, if it's ethics, then they're greater good of things that they can do.
Yeah, you said the words greater good. Philosophy, at its best, is the study of consequences. The study of unexpected consequences, right? So, a good philosophy student will see how decisions can lead to unanticipated effects, unanticipated consequences. By thinking through the implications of your choices, you might make wiser decisions. For example, on a basic level, there are a lot of people who said 2 years ago, what this country needs is $15 an hour minimum wage nationwide. Well, on the surface, superficially, that sounded great. But I got to tell you, $15 an hour in rural Idaho, and I don't mean here, I mean rural Idaho, is a ridiculously high figure. $15 an hour in a New York City restaurant is ridiculously low. $15 an hour implies that there's such a thing as a national economy. There isn't. There are regional economies. There are local economies. $40,000 a year in some areas can help you live like a king if you're in the countryside. You make $40,000 a year in New York City, and you'll be lucky to get a closet under the stairs like Harry Potter with his aunt and uncle, whose names escape me. The Dursleys. I mean, that's a great little cabinet he had. Dust falling down. But it's not, you work really hard for $40,000 a year, that's not enough to live. So one of the problems that I, being conservative, had with the idea of a nationally mandated minimum wage of $15 an hour is it doesn't make economic sense on the local level. Unanticipated consequence. So a philosopher, especially a philosopher of social harmony, I was about to say social harmonics, play the social harmonica, they are going to think about the implications of their policy. That is the way that they are trained to think. Just like doctors are trained to think. Just like scientists, like biologists are trained to think. Do any of you know what a taxonomy is in biology?
You just talked about it.
Yeah, I don't see many hands being raised. Taxonomy. You're looking at me angrily. I didn't invent it. I'm just talking about it. How dare you!
It's like an organization of all the organisms, so it's like a hierarchy, so they just get split into subdivisions that progressively get smaller and smaller and more
Okay.
specific.
Yeah. So you start by asking questions. For example, is this new life form an eater of sunlight? Yes. Plants. No. Animals. So no. Is this creature a vertebrate? I'm sorry. Is this creature visible? Yes or no? Yes, then it's visible. No, then it's microscopic. Is this creature a vertebrate? Yes or no? Let's say no. Is this creature aquatic or terrestrial or avian? You don't have many avian invertebrates flying around, but just for the heck of it, we'll say avian. No, it's not. It's an aquatic invertebrate that's visible. Does this creature have a unitary body, like a worm, or does it have long tendrils? Well, it has long tendrils. So can any of you tell me what this creature might be? It's a jellyfish. Absolutely. So that process of asking questions takes you through a taxonomy, a chart that brings you to a conclusion. Does it have horns? Does it have cloven hoofs? And maybe it's a goat. In any event, that is the way a biologist is trained to think. These Shih, these Mandarins, are trained to think in a way that deals with social harmony. So, in the West, King Louis XIV and his early advisor, Cardinal Mazarin, and his predecessor's advisor, Cardinal Richelieu, they set up what is called the bureaucracy. And we still live with the bureaucracy today. Now, the word bureaucrat means desk man. Bureaucrat, desk man. I'm a desk man. I have paperwork. I have an inbox, but never mind. There's all sorts of fun to be had by coming up with the superhero desk man. In any event, that's what a bureaucrat is. They are paper pushers. They are people who don't go in the field. They are people who work through numbers, statistics, and theories. But the bureaucrats' chief virtue to the kings in Europe is they don't work for the nobles, they work for the king. So the king, instead of relying on the dukes and counts and barons, hires a bunch of bureaucrats, and they get hired by merit, just like in China. But unlike in China, they don't study Confucian philosophy. They study the basis of what we will call agrarian theory. They study biology. They study political science. They study a lot of the things that we study today, depending upon what you do. For example, in the United States, if you are a diplomat, what you do is you have to take a test to join the State Department. And part of that test is understanding where Albania is and who rules Albania. And has the dictator of Kazakhstan actually changed his language so that Friday is the same name as bread, as the same name as his dog, which is Gerp Gorp? Is it possible? And I've heard this. I haven't confirmed it, but back about 10 years ago, I do believe that the somewhat eccentric dictator of Kazakhstan, not Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, not Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, actually did change words of the days of the week so that bread and his dog had the same name as the new name for Thursdays, I think. So you'd have to learn things like that.
Someone out there.
Okay.
It's a Caligula fighting the sea.
On the one hand, the Western idea is very scientific. On the other hand, they lose out on the philosophy side. And so Western bureaucrats tend to be seen as sort of unfeeling, out of touch eggheads who have no sympathy for the consequences of their choices on the lives of real people. No, bureaucrats have a lousy reputation. On the other hand, that's how we deal with things. 9/11 happens. Thousands of Americans killed and foreigners on American soil by Islamic terrorists. What do? Aside from launching wars in Afghanistan and later Iraq, we set up a new bureaucracy, the Department of Homeland Security. We hire a bunch of paper pushers whose job it is to focus on the terror threat, both overseas and internally. Bureaucracy to the rescue. Which is fine, but it's an inferior copy to what China had. Because the Chinese Mandarins actually studied something about human nature. They studied something that had universal appeal, not just specialist knowledge. Okay. A special environment is built for the Chinese emperor called the Forbidden City. You saw it in those clips. It's a walled-off world the size of a small town. And the emperor is the focus of everyone. And there are thousands of people that work in the Forbidden City as senior bureaucrats, as eunuchs, as soldiers. But the only men that are allowed to stay within the walls after dark is the emperor. That's the only man. Everyone else has to leave, except the eunuchs who protect him at night, and the soldiers who are around the outer edge. And within the Forbidden City, everything is designed to give the emperor a unique lifestyle. Now, King Louis XIV decides to reproduce this, but in his own inimitable way. He builds 19 miles southwest of Paris, the Palace of Versailles. Versailles is an artificial world. For one man, the King of France, his nobles come there, spend half the year with him, and the other half of the nobles spend the other half of the year with him, and his bureaucrats come there, and the King of France almost never goes to Paris after Versailles is built. Very rare phenomenon. He rules from this artificial world. Now, I will come back to Versailles in a moment. There are just a couple of other things about China. Okay, Chung Kuo is what Chinese call their own land. It means the Middle Kingdom. But there is a variant, Chung Kuo, which means the central flowery of culture. The central flowery of culture. This gives you a notion of how Chinese see their own culture, traditionally, pre-communist Chinese. They see their society as a garden, producing cultivated people, culture. And the other gardens imitate China. And in East Asia, that's the history. Up until the arrival of Europeans in force, China is the Middle Kingdom. Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, they're all satellite states of China. Mongolia, too. Finally, you will see different ways of writing Chinese in English. So, traditionally, the bloodiest dictator in human history was written this way. Mao Zedong. However, in modern, post-1970s books, he's written this way. Murder of between 80 and 120 million Chinese in peacetime. Why the difference? Why is Peking now called Beijing? Why the difference? Here's why. The original form of English-Chinese translation that we got was developed by Englishmen in southern China near Canton, what's now called Guangzhou, and Hong Kong, the British Crown colony of Hong Kong, when it was free. This was a system called Wade-Giles. Wade-Giles was developed by English speakers who understood Chinese, and it was based in Southern Chinese dialect, which is almost a completely different language. In the late 1970s, the Communist government of China decides, no, we're not doing this anymore. We rule from Beijing, which is northern China, and we want Chinese speakers to develop the translations. So this is called Pinyin. And the Pinyin system is based on Northern Chinese dialect, which is Mandarin, which is the official government dialect in China. But being derived from Chinese speakers who understand English rather than English speakers who happen to understand Chinese, there are logics that are very different. Pinyin has a lot of X's, a lot of Z's, and it looks just baffling to many English speakers. I learned Wade-Giles. I still pronounce things in a Wade-Giles-y sort of fashion. Wade-Giles makes more sense to me. But I have Chinese friends who say that Pinyin is far more faithful to Mandarin, even if it baffles English speakers. So if you see a word in Chinese that seems to mean something that you know by another name, it's probably because you have these two different translation systems. Okay? Now, please close the shades. I wonder where I put that. We are going to look at a young woman's introduction to Versailles. This is from the true story of Marie Antoinette, who was the daughter of the Austrian empress, the ruling empress, Maria Theresa of the House of Habsburg. She, at age 14, is sent to France to marry the Crown Prince of France,
14.
who will become Louis XVI. She was 14, yeah. That's the way they did things back then. It's a royal wedding. It's about unifying the houses. He was about 15 or 16.
Oh.
So it's not like he was an old man. They were of an age.
So not even there.
So what this is from a movie that definitely has its bad points, Marie Antoinette, with Kirsten Dunst, made about 18 years ago. This movie uses early 2000s pop music because you got to relate to the teens. But it does a really good job of showing an introduction to Versailles. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch several scenes. Please kill the lights that show her leaving her world and going to Versailles. If you can't see the screen, please move.